Jenny Ray LaRue, the MD of Management Consulted, and I'm here today to talk about networking and the resume review. Now, in a previous video, I talked about the resume review process in great detail when I was talking about resumes, but here I'm going to talk about specifically how networking is used in the actual formal resume review. The focus today is in resume reviews that happen for target schools on cycle. There are different processes that each firm uses for off-cycle or experienced hires. So that's not quite covered today, although some of these same rules can still apply to that process. First, I want to talk about the pre-review. This is not a formal part of the process, and firms don't actually hold good lists and naughty lists, but they do have informal ways of categorizing people, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Basically, your initial interactions with people from the firm can sometimes be discussed afterwards. So after an information session or after a coffee chat, a lot of times representatives from the firm will be asked who stood out to them in both a positive way and in a negative way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you get on the pro list and how to avoid being on the con list. People that are on the pro list fit into one of a couple of categories. Sometimes there is overlap between these categories. The first is that you've got impressive communicators, people who are really dynamic, very smiley, very effervescent, and very able to impressively communicate their thoughts. The second are people who have very strong background, both strong academic background as well as strong work experience. The third are people who are friends of friends, someone who has a connection inside the firm or maybe has a long legacy of friends that were upperclassmen who have now gone into consulting. And the final area are people who have just great personalities, somebody that's very easy to like and easy to get to know. People who fall into each one of these categories are generally going to be the ones that the firms notice. It's not necessarily the loudest, it's not necessarily the pushiest people, it's just the people who are the most natural and close to a fit for consulting, as they can tell. On the con list, the second side, you have people who they're generally saying, look, we used our networking interactions to determine that you will not be right for the firm. The impression that you made on us is not one that we would want to leave in the hands of anyone else in the firm or put you in front of a client. So we're just going to go ahead and make sure that we don't interview you at a later time because we're considering this pre-review interaction to be your actual interview. There are a couple ways that you can get on the con list, and let me tell you, you don't want to be on the con list because it will be very challenging for you ever to get an interview with a firm if you are. A couple of ways that you get on the con list include being a really awkward communicator, being incredibly shy, not thinking through what you want to talk about, not having a strategy, or just in general asking questions that you don't listen to the answers for. The second thing is if you're an oversharer. A lot of times people come to consultants and ask them questions that really should not be asked of an actual representative of the firm. Things about a difficulty in your background, maybe how to decide between an exploding offer and what's happening in a consulting firm, just something that the consulting firm doesn't really need to know about and really actually shouldn't know about that will really taint their impression of you. The third are people who are very long-winded. Consultants are known for being direct, concise, and succinct. And so if somebody is incredibly long-winded, they generally say, like, that's an indication that you're not going to be a good fit. And finally, someone who's pushy. This can be in the initial process, just pushing to actually get an interaction with a consultant, or later when you've gone through the process and you're following up with someone. Maybe they offered to do a resume review for you and you emailed them 7 or 10 times reminding them about this resume review that they offered to do. Their goodwill is likely to fade after email 2 or 3. So just make sure that you're not too pushy in the process. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the actual resume review. So once the resumes have been reviewed offline and each of them have been scored, a group of people will come together to review the resumes. And generally you fall into 3 categories. And networking is critical to all 3 of the categories. The first category I'll call the A list. These are people who are generally guaranteed interviews almost before the resume review begins. And you generally get here through a couple of ways. First of all, you can rank very high across the board. You'll be one of the favorites in the actual ranking process. The second thing is that you can go through partner networking, so you can have a very powerful advocate inside the firm. Partners generally don't advocate for somebody that they don't already know. So it's generally somebody who the partner already has a relationship. If you're in that situation, make sure that you take advantage of it. Then the next area are pre-selected candidates. These are often people who have interviewed before, but are now going through the process again as they're going through the networking process. So they maybe achieved an offer or achieved at least final rounds. They did well enough that the firm invited them to come back. So oftentimes they'll give them an interview slot before they even go through the rest of the resume review process. And then finally, people who are on the pro list. So people who in networking, they began to watch out for because they really liked them. So maybe their credentials are okay, but they're somebody that they really think would be a good fit for the firm. The second category is the abyss. And in the abyss, you generally have two types of people. First, really low ranking candidates. And second, people who are on the con list. So somebody even who is high ranking or medium ranking would sometimes fall into the abyss. And this is the people that they don't even discuss. They're just people that they automatically exclude from the process. So you don't want to be on the con list because it will mean that you don't even get a shot to have a discussion about you in the actual resume review. The final group, and this is the group where a lot of time is spent, is the group that goes through a discussion. So they're a group that's actually discussed in the resume review. In this group, you have a couple of different kinds of candidates. First, you have medium ranking candidates, generally people who are pretty strong, pretty well-rounded, but maybe not complete standouts in any area. And second, you have rescues from the abyss. This area is where networking is incredibly critical, because either if someone was rescued from the abyss because they had a very strong connection with someone, or if you met them through the process and they really liked you and they want to advocate for you to go through and get an interview, then those positions are going to be incredibly important. Oftentimes, only about 25% of the people that are actually in the discuss pile get an interview. So because of the likelihood and the odds being so small in that category, it's really important to bump up your chances that you have somebody who's willing to step up for you. One common misconception is that in that resume review, it's really essential to have multiple people who will speak up for you. And it's fine to meet multiple people, but generally you want one person to know that they're taking the lead to really advocate for you. So you want to maybe have conversations with multiple people, but make sure you focus your interactions on one person who's likely to advocate for you. If you've got questions about this, of which there are probably many, we have a lot of resources on our website to help. First of all, we publish a networking Bible, which offers step-by-steps on how to actually go through the networking process. We also have the option to spend time with us in a half an hour. We call it a power half hour to discuss your specific networking strategy. In the meantime, if you've got questions, we've got lots of resources on networking at managementconsulted.com.